Well, yeah, started. So, hello everyone. Here we are with Sasha Strauss. He's the founder and managing director of Innovation Protocol. He has also, well, with his company, has worked with Lego, eBay, PayPal, Google, Nestle, Warner Brothers, among others. So it's awesome to have him on board. He's also the professor of UCLA Anderson School of Management and Marshall School of Business. He's a brand expert, public speaker, entrepreneur, thought leader, amazing person. So, Sasha, really glad to have you on board, and thanks for accepting
My
this
honor.
invitation.
Thank you for giving me this chance.
So, well, let's just enter to this couple of questions. Like, before we just enter on branding, entrepreneurship, and everything, like, could you give us a little bit more information about your background, like how you started everything, and why did you just focus on what you're doing right now?
Well,
Please.
when I was young, I didn't know what I wanted to do professionally. You know, some people say, "Oh, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer," or anything in the arts is not going to give you a career. And so you kind of wander as a youth. And what I remember distinctly was that anytime there was a business or a nonprofit or a university, that there was someone communicating on its behalf, like, you know, someone speaking its words for it, communicating it to its audiences, whether it was trying to recruit students or donors. And I noticed it since I was a child. I always watched the sort of intermediary communicator. And so as soon as I turned 18 and started working, I decided that I was going to work in that business of that communication. So I started to work in, let's say, advertising, which is putting signs up to point people at something, or started to work in public relations or marketing. And over time, after about a decade of doing that, I eventually got to a point where I realized what I cared about most was what was at the center of all those communications. So it doesn't matter if we're a university, if we're doing advertising, marketing, and public relations, and we're doing social media, and we're printing brochures. What's our central voice? What is it that we as an institution care most about? And does everybody understand that? And are we communicating it clearly and fairly? Now, that activity, the activity of creating that message, that is, quote, brand strategy. I can think it could be called a lot of other things. So eventually got to a point where I worked for companies who only did those things. They only did brand strategy. And like in any profession, like architecture or law, if you do it long enough, then people start calling you, not necessarily the company you work for. And that's when the entrepreneurial trigger went off. It was like, what? Wait, you're calling me? You don't need this big famous institution over here, you know? And they're like, no, we want you to work on a project like you worked on the last project. We don't care where you work. Well, all right, that says to me that maybe it's worth trying. And I had a lot of people voting in my favor at the time. And so I started the business based on people asking me to do so. And only late into the business, only maybe 4 years in, that I realized that, oh my gosh, this is entrepreneurship. This isn't like Sasha getting good at something and then becoming a consultant, or like getting a couple people to help him. This was also starting a business, like human resources and operations and technology and capital management and all these other things. And so what made entrepreneurship so much more fun than I ever imagined it would be was that it also came with all these other complex problems to solve, like keeping an employee workforce of 20 people happy. Like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that that was going to be so much of my energy was going to be focused on that specifically. And what a great learning experience it's been for me. So long answer to your question, where did I start in all of this? I was curious about the way that people communicated. I worked in lots of businesses around communication. And then after doing it enough that I became an expert, enough people voted in my favor that I could start my own business. In starting my own business, I got the gift of entrepreneurship, which was not only getting to do what I love doing, but learning about lots of other things about business in the midst of it. And that's why it's been so fulfilling.
Well, that's an awesome story, and basically I've seen so many entrepreneurs that have been like on the same scale or loop in life, where they're just working something that they're really passionate about, and they just get really good at it. And then at some point people say like, hey, I just want to hire you, but so many people just ask you that then you can't become one employee like full time for that company. So then you just start your own business and
Yeah.
it pops up and then explodes. So it's a very like interesting endeavor and like a lot of risk and happiness and bad
Yes.
things happen. But it's something like that I've been willing to pursue, and also you and everyone that's gonna review this. So well, you have mentioned that you have three kinds of jobs. One is innovation protocol, right? The other one is
Yes.
being a teacher, and the other one is a speaker at thousands of events worldwide. So I know that you have been talking, like working with entrepreneurs or just
Yes.
networking with them, and also big corporations. So what have you seen that is the common thing that all of these businesses have in common? Like, what is the main thing that if you can give us information
Yes.
related to that?
Well, I like that you pulled together the things that I do only because those audiences are so different. I think it'll help all of us frame it. Like, you know, so you talked about students. So like, what about their psychology in business, right? And then you said, what about my audiences, my speaking audiences? Oh my gosh, they're a completely different type of person, right? And then there's all the businesses that I'm spending time with. And, you know, I will tell you that there's one thing that is common amidst all of them right now, which is the change that we are going through, like the Gutenberg press when we started printing books, changed literacy in Europe. Like, oh my gosh, everybody can read now. We can study faith and we can learn about history. Like, change the way that people thought. Right? I would argue that television probably did that also. You know, it's like another major transition. Well, the internet. I mean, we turned society over with the internet, and look at how education has been evolved because of it. Look how global business has evolved because of it. Well, when you add things in like social media and big data, oh my gosh, we are in the midst of such a transition as a humanity that all nonprofits, all graduate students, all executive businesses, all of these audiences and these speaking forums are all tripping out on how drastic this change is, where like being able to move currency, digital currency, across borders in heartbeats by the click of a mouse. Like, you don't have to like go into a bank and like show them collateral. Like, what? How's this? We don't want Russia to go to war. Not just because we care about peace, but because of the economic disruption it will cost all of its neighboring economies. Like, we don't want their economies to stumble. So we're like, okay, Russia, you know, we'll dance on the outside of what you're doing. Like, that's how intertwined the universe is. And so when you layer on social media and all of these big data and 3D printing, like all of these organizations that all of these audiences are a part of are just trying to hold on. They're like, all right, do we just survive this? Do we try to knock a competitor out of the way and survive it? Wait a minute, is there space for all of us? You know, like they're in the midst of this contemplation, and it's fun, scary for me. Fun-scary, because I'm like, wow, the times are changing, and I get to witness it from the inside of all of these minds. But simultaneously, it's scary to watch them be scared, to watch them, you know, these amazing organizations be like, shoot, should we go left or right? And left or right are such different paths for the business, you know? So the universal linking thing amongst all of those audiences we described is that they're all in the midst of such change that they're scared of what it means to the future of their organizations.
Yeah, and I've been talking with so many, like, maybe not startups, but at least corporations. What I've been seeing so far is, because startups, like, at least the majority that I've been talking to, they're like in early stage, so they're like kind of connected to what the internet and technology is all about. So they already like got a little bit this understanding. Now they don't know how to move forward, but that's a total different like conversation. But when I talk with like big corporations that they have been like here in the industry for 20, 30, 40 years, they're like all the time like, how can the people see us like an innovative company or a digital company? And they're like struggling so much because they're still sending sometimes letters to their houses saying like, we're digital. and they're not understanding what is happening with this new customer that you're
Yes.
talking about, or the people like globally. So look, if you could give them like three like advice on how they can actually start like connecting with this new
Oh,
world that is happening, because it's, for example, now like I have two young brothers and one daughter, and they already know what an iPhone is, and like all the television is already connected. Like they don't believe me that I live that sometimes where the cell phone didn't
wow.
exist. So, and it's a life
Right.
changing thing. So, and I see that it's something that is also happening to the company. So could you give them like just three advice of how to connect with this new world that is just moving forward, and how you say like you don't know if you're surviving, living it, or just seeing it happen because it's just exploding all over the place.
I mean, what a big question. And, it's worth discussing. Like, it's worth us working this out together because, I was reading the paper the other day, which is an oxymoron. Like, why am I reading the paper? The news in it is 24 hours old. What? So I'm reading the paper, and it's talking about how the big telecommunications company here in the United States wants to provide, quote, Uber level service. Now, Uber is this internet-based company that has completely disrupted taxis and black car drivers and those types of car services. And what's interesting about it is that they just put together a phenomenal business model in a very needy market. And because they filled that, they went after filling the void, not after like big ego. Like, what category of apps could we get into that would be really cool to talk about? We're calling a car, that's not sexy, right? But because they first went after the problem in the business, then their digital communication strategy, rating all the drivers and letting that information be public, it worked because they went after a real business problem. They didn't start as an entrepreneur saying, what would be fun to do? What would be cool to tell my friends about? No, they started with, okay, what's going on in society? Where do we identify a problem? Okay, cool. Can we build a really cool business in the midst of that problem? Yeah, we can. We can come up with a fun name, and we can have a fun personality, and people who are cool would use us because it becomes a status symbol. They went after the business problem first. So that's my first answer to your question. Three things for these entrepreneurs to think about in the midst of this. Everyone is frantically trying to communicate. They all want to be the coolest marketers. Stop, hold your breath for a second. I want you to talk. First, carve out the business issue you're trying to solve for. And then you can talk. So that's the first consideration. The second consideration is that in one of my speeches, I talk a lot about this idea that that we can assume nothing about our customer any longer because our data is old. The data that we use to manage our perspective on what our customers is doing is the old research method. So for example, you might have someone in your company who's been working in that industry for a long time, and they're like the industry expert. What I'm suggesting is that if the internet changed everything, if social media changed everything, then that old data, that old perspective isn't contemporary enough. It's not modern enough to be what governs our decisions right now. So I'll give you a real simple number 2 answer, which is keep your data fresh. How do you keep your data fresh? Take your top 10 competitors and create Google alerts for them. Like, how about knowing every day what your biggest 10 competitors have said or done that has drawn up internet interest or been forced into the internet domain? Like, cool, we couldn't have done that years ago. But how do you survive in this new normal? You use the tools. You use the tools that apply in both directions.
Perfect.
Cool.
And the third one is using the
Oh,
tools.
no. So the third one, the third one is that the customer, the person that you're trying to sell to, and let's separate customer and consumer. Okay. Consumer is the one who ultimately eats the product, uses the software. But the customer, the buyer, might be the parent, it might be the chief information officer. Okay. So the third thing in this new normal is that you cannot treat them as the same thing. You have to market, advertise, publicly relate, social media engage them wholly differently, because they may be a generation apart.
So the three advices you would give is go after business, not only what is sexy or cool to talk about, but just go after a real need.
Right.
Then keep your data fresh, because actually everything is just moving so fast that it's kind of ridiculous to use, like you mentioned, all assumptions or all research data to actually prove something that you want to do. And treat your customer and your consumer different, because they're just two worlds apart.
Yeah.
And actually that's very interesting, because for example, if you need to buy some food for your son or daughter, they just target the son in the supermarket, so they just cry so much that they want this specifically, and just but they're not treating me well. They're just giving them the need of getting that.
Great.
And at some point, what I buy in the long term is something that tackles me, where I say this will be healthy for my daughter or for my son or for my brother or for anyone that I love, because it just educates me, and that I know it's a good thing for them, and then I just start talking about that. So and I believe that that's something related to what you mentioned in other presentations, and it's because there's some people or companies that they're not just only for the business over there, but they're also for a cause, because they just believe in something. And could you give us more information related to that? Because I believe that a lot of people now are just focused on being an entrepreneur because it's a hot topic. But what I've been seeing so far is that we have lost the people that actually are changing the world. You have a couple of people that are in a mission, and then a bunch of them that they just want to do earn money. So could you give us more information related to that, and how to run a company with that direction?
Well, first we have to ask ourselves, why are there so few of them? They must exist, right? I mean, there's no reason why there were more of them last time.
Yeah.
And I think that our answer lies in how hard it is to be a public figure these days. Because 20 years ago, as a public figure, as a famous person, as a politician, as a pilot, pick whatever your character was, your astronaut, most of your existence was private. Now, there was the stuff that when you were in public or you were talking in business or amongst, your customer community, yes, then you were in the public domain. But at home or in your social life, that stuff was private. You could go to your churches, you could date your people, you could do your thing. And I think that what scares the people you and I are looking for, those creative contributors, those impactors, is that they're probably really scared of the public backlash, because none of us are perfect. We all have our secret issues, or maybe not so secret issues, but it's hard. It's hard to be critiqued by the masses, because everyone takes issue with something that you are, And I think that's probably scaring those that deserve to be leading us through this change.
So, well, yeah, I believe that, for example, with the death of Nelson Mandela,
Right.
the world lost a really strong, leader, a person that had a big cause and a big mission. And then the same thing happened with Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
He just pulled his cause and his vision into an iPhone or an Apple, or he just built a company out of it, and actually changed the whole world. So what I see that that could be a key issue. What is happening today, as like even the startups or the 4 to 500 companies, like that they're losing that cause or something to believe in, and that they cannot transmit that to the customer or client. Who knows? But
Yeah.
but what is your thought related to that, and how we should tackle that as a like a company that's just starting it?
You know, these are the types of, and this is the type of audience engagement that has to be earned, right? That's, I think, the challenge here is that the internet era, the mobile era, the consumer-driven era is so, you know, you post something to Instagram and 10 seconds later, it's now like old news. Like, please don't, I'm not going to bother scrolling past anything that's 10 seconds, which is really unfortunate because great businesses, entrepreneurial driven ideas that make visionaries, they take time to nurture into existence. You know, to make an iPhone, it wasn't like some genius second that converted the world. This was a lifetime of investment from one individual, right? So I think that my concern is that we're scaring away the potential visionaries because, one, we only talk about the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. And come on, I mean, are those even the right people? Are those even the right people for us to be talking about? Why can't we only focus on a local visionary? You know, it's not big enough to be big enough locally now. You have to be of public empire, you know, and that's not going to enable any change because everyone's just either a zero or a magnificent, you know, the scale of like a deity. And it's like, come on, there's so much space in between where you can be of importance. You can be a contributor, even if you just stay local or just stay countryside or only go to one place in the world. You don't have to be an international dignitary to have been purposeful in our existence. Wow, what a rant I just went on. How funny. But anyway, you know, I think that when Nelson Mandela died, I felt like you felt, which was like, can I name another man like him, another human like him in our existence?
No.
And this is, you know, you're asking me about giving people something to believe in. Try that. This was so mind-boggling to me that when I heard it, I had to go out and validate to ensure I wasn't crazy, which was that, you know, Mother Teresa changed millions of lives. I mean, on a scale that we almost could never quantify, because she touched so many people and gave them something to believe in. She made the sick healthy, not by magic, but by giving them a breath of belief, right? Well, she journaled her whole life, and eventually all this information became public that she feels like she actually never had an experience with God.
Whoa.
Sorry, what? Wait a minute. So she did change millions and saved them by all definitions of saved, but she herself questioned the existence of God. Let's try this on. Is that okay? For the common good of what it enabled, was it all right that she got these people to see into themselves and ignite some belief and faith that gave them a gift of life? That is the finest of good. That is the most good we could create. And she chose the vessel of religion to do that. What I'm fighting for is, bless religion be, but it is not the only thing that we can believe in. We can also believe in our favorite sports team. We can also believe in our family lineage. We can believe in our university. So, let us not put all the weight of human belief in religion alone. Let us distribute the weight of belief amongst a range of organizations like the company that I work for, my kids' soccer team, right?
Yeah.
So it's the responsibility of those small, local, neighborly, community-wide organizations to give me something to believe in so that I don't put all of my faith in a single organization, which is bad investment strategy. Yeah. You need to diversify, otherwise you're tossed. So that's what I'm asking.
So well, that's really interesting, and I've seen a couple of like companies and brands that they made you like it. For example, like you mentioned also one on one of your keynotes, but it's really interesting. Like for example, here in Chile where I live, that Starbucks, you know, like there's two competitions of Starbucks here, two competitors, and no one makes you feel as Starbucks makes you feel, you know, like, and they just made you believe that Starbucks is like your third part or your third place, and you have your home where you work at, and then Starbucks, and I believe that that's something that the leader always envisioned, and I've read like his like bios and a lot of information about him, and he was just fully focused on that, like the whole like experience that you have to live at a Starbucks, even like what you smell like when you enter, the lights, everything, and that made this significant impact of what Starbucks it is right now. So like how you mentioned, maybe it's kind of tough right now because all this like entrepreneurs, or any person actually, it doesn't have to be an entrepreneur, if they have a cause or something they believe for, and you said it like perfectly, like with all this information and that is happening like in a second, like people can actually just destroy you and because they just don't think the same as you, and that can actually like end everything, or your career, or anything that you want to do. And maybe that's why a lot of people don't want to actually push forward any limits of them, and just stay stable of doing a copycat of a company, instead of actually just changing everything, you know, like, and I believe that's the biggest issue of like startups and like big companies. What is happening right now is that they know what to do, because there's so many things happening in just 1 second that they're just like, everything's falling apart, so they're just trying to survive instead of just changing the way things work. So now let's go into more like specific things, so people can get more information about this call. Like, what could be of the phases of like strategic brand development? You know, like, what is the process of building the company's brand?
Cool. So in this new time, this era that we're all in the midst of, and the types of data that are now available because of the internet age, when you construct a brand, and when I say brand, I mean your identity, your who you are and why you matter as a company, or who you are and why you matter as a nonprofit, but also what you matter to why you matter to your employees, like what they think about, why your investors believe in you and are going to let you stumble. The creation of that thing is not all art. It's not just hocus pocus artistry, or magical pure artistry, or deep emotional artistry. Those things may get to play, but there's a process of business rationale and competitive analysis and customer study where you are not guessing at like what the tone of our business should be or what words we should use to describe our value. You've actually put the milestones in place where you're standing on a really strong foundation. Like, let me just use BMW as an international example of this, because I think it works effectively. It's like, you know, I could say to you, do you like cars? And you have to think about all the cars, all the makers, you know, but if I said, what about high performance European luxury sports sedans that are German engineered? Well, now I must only be talking about one of a couple companies. Yeah. So when it comes to consumer psychology, they have done their customer a service by saying, look we're not all these things. We're a very specific thing. And when you're ready for that specific thing, know that that's what we put all of our time and energy into creating for you. That that concerted effort has created a business that lasts through troubled times, that people will let them forgive. They make mistakes, and that's okay. And I think that what everyone's looking for now in this era of disbelief, where there's a void in the belief ecosystem, is that they're looking for something to hold on to. Like they want. The thing that made Starbucks, I think, effective was that it was consistent. Not perfect, right? Not great coffee, not great price, not great parking. Consistent promise delivered so that you could bet on it. You'd know how you'd feel, right? You'd know what you would get from it. And by, one, finding a business problem, consumers clearly need a third place. How much would they be willing to pay? Well, a country club costs this much. A library is free. They need somewhere in between. They'll probably pay $4.50 maybe to be there. Great. What do we need to give them to make them feel like they should stay? Something that cost us 10 cents to make? Perfect. And they put together this solution where the person gets their space, gets their time, gets their experience consistently, whether I'm in Chile or Fiji. I can get the same consistency. The problem with the modern entrepreneur is that they are short-sighted. They're looking for putting out the fire, only quenching the mind of the consumer in this second. But the consumer's swirling. Like the consumer is internet impacted. There's new information coming at them all the time. So the entrepreneur has to back out a little bit, take in all the data that's available, and say, look, yes, the consumer is wandering, but in the aggregate, they're actually going a very consistent direction. They actually seem to feel this way consistently, and thus it is worth us investing and growing familiarity with them. So in this strategic brand development process, in this era, you don't try to guess what would be cool. You don't say, ooh, this would be a fun name, or I really like this message. Your opinion as the business leader doesn't matter. What matters is the language of the consumer, the environment in which they operate, who they're influencing socially, where they work and how they work. And that information becomes where you strategic brand develop. Within those parameters of, okay, we're only talking to women. Those women have probably 1 to 2 children, but they're professionals. These women work full time and they're also great mothers. Okay, so when they're driving, their priority is safety. Safety. Okay, safety. Wow. I think we can position ourselves as the safest option. Okay, great. And they also want to make sure that they've spent their money in a rational way. They don't want to feel like they've overspent. It makes them feel like they're not being smart with their money. Okay, interesting. Well, here we go, Volvo. Here we go, Volvo as a brand, not trying to be the extreme of anything other than, quote, for life, for safety. Is it the safest car in the world? No. No government's measuring systems would tell you that Volvo is the safest car. Psychologically, though, the person who drives a Volvo is on a safety mission. And the people driving around the Volvo are like, oh, it's a Volvo. It must be someone concerned with safety, so I'll drive around them or I won't honk. Very different than when you pull up on someone in a Porsche 911 Turbo. Yeah. Their priority is not safety. You think of them totally differently, and they think of themselves totally differently. They think of everything differently because of that psychology that the brand brings. That takes investment to create.
Whoa, that's actually perfect, and talking about for example, naming the company. That's something that really triggers me a lot because every time I've been also started a lot of companies. The majority have failed, so it's part of life,
Welcome to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and sometimes I just say hey, we want to do this, and this name sounds cool enough, so we just search on Google, and it's already bought. And of course. I believe that 99.9% of all the domains that I've been doing a little brainstorm are bought. So it's kind of because sometimes you just get to a point where you just name your company as something that maybe you're not involved or not involved in love with it, but it's what it is, so. But I believe that there's a process of doing that, because. I've been just doing it for fun and to find a cool name that actually people can remember. and also like it says what we do, kind of like, or what is that I can buy for, and it says what we're doing. So it's kind of like a tough situation that I believe, or I bet at least, that a lot of entrepreneurs just take it for granted and say like, okay, let's just put this name and that's it. And I believe that, for example, like Starbucks or Volvo or BMW, they didn't do that like just for that. Or now, for example, if we're talking about like internet companies like Google or Cisco or I don't know, like now Groupon, like all of them, they thought about something specific, and I believe that they made a specific like process, and that's how they get like this name that is part of their brand and their identity. So could you give us more information about that, like is the building process of naming a company?
You got it. Before I do, I want us to just index the brands you just mentioned: BMW, Google, Groupon. What else?
Volvo that you mentioned, and
well, let's just take those. Let's just take those as an example. Okay. So first of all, BMW is a acronym. It stands for Bavarian Motor Works. So that's one type of name, like IBM, International Business. Okay, that's an acronym. Very different than Google, which means it's a kind of number, like millions, billions, trillions, Googleplex, right? Wow, that's an interesting type of name. That's not an acronym, right? And as you go through all those organizations, you realize that one type of name is not better than another. So what I say, and what you're asking me to do here, is explain that there's a process, though, to creating a name that you won't get sued for using, that your customers can pronounce, that works in neighboring future international markets where you planned it in advance. You haven't picked a word that those folks can't pronounce. You picked a name that is internet safe. You see that that's a deductive process. That's not a creation process. That's, let's find where we could create a name that we would be proud to speak of because it is culturally referenced or it says something about our technologies. Once you can get around an idea that makes you proud, then you have a name that can have purpose over time. It gives value to it. That's why Google now to you is awesome, because you have seen what the organization has done and what they've attached the name to. Or you think that BMW is great because the name has been attached to, like a signature, attached to a lot of great things that they've done. So when it comes to naming, your process, 51% of the energy is spent not getting in trouble, making sure that it's free on the internet, making sure that you can trademark it, making sure that email addresses are viable. And then the other half of that is using it, attaching it to good work so that the name builds up reputation over time. So that's the trick in all of this, is that people come to me saying like, give me a cool name. And, I ask them, well, name a company that they think has a cool name. And they'll say something like Falabella, which isn't that someone's last name? Isn't it like a family name? All right, well, no, that is not cool. It might have been associated with things that made people feel like it was cool or big or wealthy or whatever the attribution is, So in the name game, as an entrepreneur, don't play the, I can't wait for it to be cool game. Go through the process of saying, what can the name not do? What do our competitors' names sound like? And then be like, okay, cool. There isn't a name that is really artistic, or there isn't a name that is really innovative, and I'm going to create a solution like that. I'll give you an example with my company, and then you can use that in your minds. My competitors are companies like Interbrand, Future Brand. Mm-hmm. You get it? Something that's happening here? Okay. There was lots of others that are like that too. I'll just leave it at that. Then my other types of competitors are named after people, like Siegel and Gale or Landor. These are either named after a person or international Interbrand or Future Brand. Okay. So in my process, I had to ask myself, well, I'm going to build an organization that may compete with these category leaders. I need something that's different. So I went after not naming it after Strauss or what do I think is going to happen in the future of branding. I went after, all right, well, is there a way to think about branding so that innovators, organizations that are changing the nature of their category, because they're having to convert consumer psychology, they're having to change buying behavior in business to business. Those innovators, whether they're providing homeless services or making enterprise software, whatever the case, those innovators, they need a protocol. They need a process to build a brand that represents their innovative way of thinking. And there has got to be an innovation protocol. There has to be a protocol for brands that innovate. All right. So we just played that game out together. I gave you my competitors and the people whose proposals are adjacent to my proposals. And the naming answer, I didn't go after what would look cool on a tattoo on my forearm. I went after, how can I make sure that I am unlike the competition, and when I talk about the name, I believe in what it stands for. And there you go. Two real words, innovation and protocol being process and innovation being a way of thinking. Wow, what a funny, relevant, unique, disruptive name for a brand strategy consulting firm.
Well, that's really smart, actually. And it's well, how you mentioned, it's very unique with comparing with your two, or the two sides of your competitors, and also makes you think more. Like, personally, I don't believe when they say, for example, like, best marketer, like, that's the name of the company, or cheapest best product, you know, like, I don't trust that. Like, that's how I think, at least. I can't speak for everyone, but at least that's my thought.
Yeah.
And, well, if it's the last name or first name of a person, yeah, it could be, but it has to be a person that I really respect. If not, then...
Correct.
Like, well, BMW, they started, like, so many years ago, so...
No, but like Mercedes-Benz, you know, I think... But most people don't know that who Mercedes or Benz is. So you see that it's
Exactly.
outlasted the individual. You're right, but in our time, in the internet era where everyone is now a digital identity, if your company is named after a person, you better hope that their identity you want synonymous with your organization. A la Lance Armstrong or the Livestrong Foundation. You know, like, oops, his identity did not align with what they... Now they have challenges because they made a person their primary representative. Accenture had the same issue with Tiger Woods, right? They had no identity other than, you like Tiger Woods, you're going to like Accenture. And then Tiger Woods became something that they didn't want him to be, and now their identity is void. You know, well, what are we, right? So this is a challenge, of course, but you have to be willing to put a stake in the ground, and that's the difference here. Rather than using someone else's identity or some cool marketing tactic of the day, you know, we beat AdWords, we figured out how to get to the top, you know, like, okay, fine, how sustainable is that? When it comes back to people really evaluating your business and how you operate and what you make and what your employees feel and what you hope will happen to the world because your business exists, when it comes back to that, you better be ready. You better be ready to give them an answer. Otherwise, they're just going to wander elsewhere because we are all desperate for something to believe in, especially at work, especially at school, especially at home, especially in the church, synagogue, mosque, pick. So it is now the responsibility of the organizations that we're a part of to give us that something to believe in.
Yeah, so that's great. So what is the protocol to engage innovation? I'm just making some words with
dude,
the name. So
you're right.
But it's something that I see that a lot of people are struggling. So
yeah, you know, like what I've witnessed is a lot of our Fortune 500 clients, you know, these big international organizations, they have like innovation business units. So let's answer the question, like, what is the protocol for innovation? And the answer is that innovation is permission. Take it like this. Instead of me handing you a problem, okay, and then you trying to solve the problem and then proving your answer wrong. Nope. All right, next. You know, toss the paper, right? Pencil again. Problem. No, toss. That is not innovation thinking. Okay, innovation thinking is that I have permission to go off on drastic tangents and bring in strange partners and think in, you know, existential ways and think in historical ways and bring all of the options, 360 degrees of options to the table, not so that you can judge them, but so that when you stand back and recognize, oh my goodness, look at all the possible ways that this can unfold. When we choose a path, we will choose it with commitment. The nature of innovation is that you have to pick a focus. You don't just get to splatter innovate. You don't just get to innovate and often. You have to look at something and direct change at it. You constantly have to pump it through the system of contemplation. So if you're going to do that, you have to first look at all possible solution arenas in all different directions so that when you pick a path to pursue, you aren't questioning it every 10 seconds. Like, should I have gone left that way? We've all been on a path, right? And you're lost and you're like, that way. Well, what they teach you in wilderness survival is focus, pick a path. In fact, if you're lost in the forest and you are responsible for saving yourself, someone's not going to come rescue you. You're walking through the forest. You line up 3 trees, one close, one middle, one far. You line them up. And then when you pass the first tree, you pick a 3rd tree again. So that way you're constantly focusing your energy, at least going in a single direction so that you can accomplish, rather than splatter creating off in any direction that intrigues you as you survive. So the responsibility for this time is to think in a way as an innovator, which is first, give myself permission to look at all possible directions, assess all directions, and then pick a path and focus. And relentlessly pursue that focus, because we're better with compounding impact than we'll ever be distributing our impact amongst 1,000 answers.
So that's basically what a lot of investors say to the startups is just do one thing good, but just of it. If you're trying to make the world in your own startup, then the probabilities of you failing are way big. But just do one thing good, focus on that, move forward. You will have thousands of struggles, but at some point you might succeed. So I don't want to take you much time, we have a couple of minutes. So if you could give just one advice to a Latin entrepreneur, that is our main audience, which one would be?
Yeah, cool. I started my entrepreneur experience believing that as an entrepreneur, it was my responsibility to figure out the solution to all of my business challenges. And I quickly realized that although I might be good at, let's say, client relations as a marketing executive, I'm good at hanging out with clients, I might not actually be phenomenal at our information technology infrastructure. So I can either be an entrepreneur that must control everything, or I can acknowledge that there are many things in the nature of business that I am not a master of, and therefore should waste no time doing. For example, managing our IT infrastructure. So what I would give to the entrepreneur that's starting out: do not try to be the master of all domains. You cannot be all things to all people. No one ever has. And in fact, the ones that have changed the world have been something very specific to a narrow few, a small community of people who over time become the belief community that enable them to create the change, because you cannot create change alone. So as an entrepreneur, be okay with outsourcing to specialists. Be okay bringing in new skills so that you can embolden the value you create. Do not try to be the king of all kingdoms. Do not try to be the queen of all decisions. Try to ensure that you can be the best at what you are, and you've distributed the weight, the burden of all the other things to those that are great at those things. It's like we might be smart enough to write up a legal contract. Is it worth the risk? No. Let us engage a lawyer. Let's buy 3 hours of lawyer time, because they are experts at specifically those things to protect our future. As an entrepreneur, seek that same type of external guidance. Join communities of entrepreneurs. There are organizations like EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. There are localized clubs. Don't try to make choices on your own. Seek the guidance of other organizations, other peers going through similar growth challenges. And now you have a massive data set that can reinforce the choices you make and no longer make you feel like you're alone in this behavior. You are now guided by a pool of peers, giving you the information you need to make decisions you're proud of.
I was on the founding team of EO in Chile, and I know that they just launched it in Argentina, and they're moving forward to South America. So EO is an amazing organization, and I believe that learning from peers, not only EO, but you have thousands of other organizations as well. It's a very interesting model, because actually it helps you understand how you can move forward and how people solve some similar challenges. that you're facing now, but they already faced it. So it's a very nice, and I don't know who made this quote, but a lot of people, like, at least in some keynotes that I've heard of, it's like, always hire people that are smarter than you. So you should be the dumbest person in the room. So it's interesting because it's the same thing that you're actually doing, is give you the permission to do that.
I want to share a learning. In EO, there's this idea called Gestalt feedback, where you don't just give someone advice. You come at it from personal experience. When I was in your situation, this is what I went through. And it's groundbreaking impact. It's just amazing. And have grown up out of is that an entrepreneur has this tendency to ask what's the one thing? What's the one answer, right? What's the one thing that I need to do? What's the one source of information? And what I have come to learn now is that there isn't such thing as a one thing. And that is where great entrepreneurs become the greatest of entrepreneurs, is that they recognize that there isn't a solution, a specific, fast, easy, cheap solution to all challenges. There's an array of options, and it becomes the game of pulling together those array of options that makes you a great entrepreneur, a great visionary. So I used to say to myself, what's the one answer? And now I ask myself, what are the 10 answers? What are the 10 answers? And then I'll choose.
So well, yeah.
Looks like you're losing your conference room.
So well, thank you so much for this call. I really enjoyed it a lot. It's a lot of information that you have provided us so far, and hopefully we can have you in the near future for maybe having more people on this call and sending you more and more questions related to more something that the entrepreneurs here maybe are struggling. So it has been an awesome day. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate everything. So thanks you. Yeah, bye.
My pleasure. I look forward to the next time.